Welcome everybody to season 3 of Gaming Guide, and this is Andrew, everybody, your host, one of your hosts as usual, and we got Mike here.
Hey.
And Mike, introduce. Let's get the rundown on our guests.
Well, before we get started, just want to let folks know we're ushering in season 3 now, and we're going to take a little bit of a different approach this season. We're going to try and get episodes out to you as they come to us, rather than wait and then do them on a weekly basis. So it's going to be a mix of getting to hear more and also waiting a little more in between episodes.
But a little more sporadic, but less of a break in between content. So, yeah.
We've got 2 guests tonight. Our main topic of discussion is going to be Yasuke, which I'm sure most of you are very well familiar with at this point. We have Floyd Webb and we have Walt Mussel. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a little introduction here. Floyd Webb is a multi-talented creative with decades of experience in global cinema, photojournalism, publishing, and advertising. Born in Mississippi and raised on the south side of Chicago, Floyd's career was inspired by early activism, a nonconformist outlook, and a deep regard for film. He lived overseas for many years, dedicating his career to Black cinema in the U.S. and abroad, and is best known for founding Chicago's Blacklight International Film Festival. And upcoming works include the upcoming documentary, Yasuke-san, and the comic, Yasuke Way of the Butterfly. Thank you very much, Floyd.
Thanks for having me.
We have also Walt Mussel. Now, Walt Mussel is an award-winning author who writes historical fiction with a focus on medieval Japan, an interest he gained in the 4 years he lived there, something we have in common.
Yeah.
The Samurai's Heart and other books of his are available on most platforms. He creates Japanese history content on social media, primarily Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And he also does lectures on Japan's Christian century. Thank you for coming on, Walt.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right.
Awesome. Well, it was interesting getting to this spot because we'd actually been talking with Walt for maybe over a year ago or something. And, we couldn't find the exact angle and how it related to video games. And then this Assassin's Creed stuff lands in our lap with Yasuke.
Yeah.
And it'd be a huge deal, and it's about a historical game. When we talked to Walt for the first time, Ghost of Tsushima had already been out, and that would have been good, but that was already kind of done. Assassin's Creed's coming out this year as of the recording of this podcast. So that worked out. Then, strangely, through a friend of mine, we were already kind of getting ready for this. Somebody else, like a friend of mine, that it's a mutual friend between me and Floyd, said, "Hey, got this guy that wants to talk about Yasuke," and I was like, "What? Really?" So, what? Coincidence. So, thanks for coming on, fellas.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get down to it. I'm gonna ask both of you this, but I guess we'll have to do it one at a time. But let's just get it out of the way. Was Yasuke a samurai, Floyd?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain why? How?
Why? How?
It's like playing devil's advocate here.
Okay. Why? How? Why? Okay.
Just to a non-believer. Can you try to convert them?
Well, I don't try to convert people. People have to convert themselves.
Good outlook. Good outlook.
All I can say is that in the research that I've done, this is a character I've heard about all my life, especially when I got into martial arts, right? And because I was in martial arts and I was living in Chicago, in a town where this was where all of the Japanese internees came. We had a lot of Japanese martial artists who would come here. We had a Kendo school. We had Aikido in the YMCA. We didn't have karate then. We had judo. The striking arts were like later, but we did have samurai cinema, right? We had a monthly, we had a weekly samurai series at Francis Park Auditorium. So between all the martial arts, the judo, and the karate, I was looking at Chambara films, right? Saturday and Sunday afternoons, which is fascinating because the films were like beautiful. But I wanted to take Kendo, and the lady that I was talking to that I bought my judo gis from, she said, she had lived in Japan during the war. And she said, there was a famous black samurai from one of the warring periods of Japan, but she didn't remember his name, right? And the Kendo teacher kind of looked at me funny. He says, "Yeah, I've heard about it, but I found out about it. There was a book. There was a guy in Chicago by the name of Hammurabi Rob who wrote little Black history pamphlets, and he was friends with a guy named J.A. Rogers, who wrote a book called The World's Great Men of Color. And so he had a section on Asia, but we still didn't get to the bottom of who Yasuke actually was. It took me years until I went away to Tanzania and I started questioning people, and I was seeing, I was seeing, like back then I didn't hear anything about him being a slave. All this stuff comes up from the Jesuits, right? The Jesuits in their reports, he's mentioned as a slave. In the Japanese, in the Lord Nobunaga Chronicles, it's never mentioned as a slave. They say he was a kurobozo, right? A kurobozo is a dark, mysterious figure, right? It's most of the Buddhas back in the 16th, 15th, 16th century, a lot of the Buddhas were Black, right? So if somebody Black turned up, they would immediately associate them with this Buddha, and there was a certain mysticism about it. But see, living in America, the thing about living in America is that we're really isolated. We're really isolated from a lot of what's happening in the world, and a lot of us tend not to be very, very curious, and we create these constructs that have nothing to do with with the rest of the world. I lived outside the world. I lived in Africa. I lived in Europe. I traveled I traveled from Morocco all the way to Tanzania by land. I was 20 years old. I wasn't scared of shit back then. I was like, I had no fucking. I had no idea.
Don't worry.
I had no idea. You know what I mean? Today I look back on that trip, I'm like, damn, I could have been left in the middle of the desert someplace and nobody ever would have known it. And but yeah, so doing that trip across Africa taught me a lot. It gave me, but what I was seeing was these remnants of warrior cultures, right? All throughout the Muslim countries. I mean, blades were every place. People practice. You know what I mean? You could pass through a neighborhood and you would hear the clank of swords, and you would go behind a wall, and somebody would be practicing these skills with these not necessarily scimitars, but sort of curved instruments. There's a guy, Damon Stith. Damon Stith is in Texas, and he has this organization where he teaches people African swordsmanship. And I don't know if he's ever been to Africa, but when I see him, he's got the same skills. So it's like Yasuke's origins are in Africa, right? We talk about Japan, right? Everybody wants the last samurai. Everybody wants Shogun. But that's not the story we want to tell. We want to tell, who was this guy? Where did he come from? He was an elite African warrior. He was he was a Bari Tonga warrior, right? A Bari Tonga warrior they're trained, like when you think about the Jedi and what happened to the Jedi, when colonialism came in, that happened to every warrior culture that couldn't resist cannons, right? Who knows the great martial arts that were lost during the Boxer Rebellion, and it's repeated over and over again. These warrior cultures who resisted colonialism were wiped out. So we don't get the history, Now, but the oral history remains.
Thank you for that. And Walt, was Yasuke a samurai?
As I think I said in the email to you originally, you asked me the question, and I quoted, who was the guy, Hangman from Top Gun Maverick, as he would say, damn straight. He was most definitely a samurai. And what's amazing about him, and the thing that doesn't get told about Yasuke, is just how brilliant of an individual he was. And let me explain what I mean by that. Yasuke, the slave issue, I've seen discussions about it. It's more like a Roman slave as opposed to the image that we have of today. In which case, but however he was a bodyguard to Valeriano, and that's what his job was. The one issue I always wonder about, and which I haven't seen a good explanation for, is how he switches from Valignano to Nobunaga.
Huh.
Yasuke arrives with Valignano in 1579,
Mhm.
and basically they make their way all the way up to Kyoto, and they arrive in Kyoto in 1581. So he's been
Okay.
hanging. Valignano is the father visitor of, basically he's in charge of all missionary efforts in the East. But he was powerful enough to rise to his position in only 3 years, and that's a
Yeah.
political move, if anything, to be the
Yeah.
spot where he was in. At the same
Right.
time, he was also the one who told the rest of the Jesuits, "This is a better culture than we have. We need to adopt their culture, not forcing them to adopt ours." But in 1579, Yasuke, you have to think of him as basically, you think of like those soccer players that come into football,
Mhm.
and they're
Oh, American
playing one sport, and they come in and they can do something else because they are so athletically gifted. I'm just thinking,
football.
people are gifted in one sport and can convert that to another sport. And that's what Yasuke was. He was gifted. One of his gifts was his warrior training growing up, wherever he got it. The
Mhm.
original thing was, he supposedly came from the original story I first read was he came from Mozambique, because that's where the Jesuits would stop. If you didn't, you would leave when you were going to India from Europe. You'd leave Lisbon in late March, early April,
Mhm.
and then you'd swing around Africa. You'd go between Madagascar and the continent. If you caught the monsoon winds, you could get to Goa by September. If you didn't catch them in time, you were stuck in Mozambique until it came around the following year.
Except there was no Mozambique at that time.
Well, I won't argue. You're
There was
right.
an
I'm just
island. There was an island called Mozambique. There was an
I, and I
island,
and I and I
Mozambique and
appreciate the
Kilwa. Yeah.
clarification. I
Yeah.
appreciate the
Yeah.
clarification. But
Yes.
that's where you would stop and you'd go
Yeah.
across, and so that's where they picked up Yasuke.
Yeah.
And Yasuke supposedly is a Japanese version of the biblical name Isaac. So
Uh-huh.
I
Okay.
do not know if that's correct or not, but that is some of the theory behind it.
It's speculate. Yeah. It's
It is
just more
speculation
speculation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
theory.
Because it doesn't. Yeah. There is no Japanese word.
for ya.
There's no Japanese word for Yasuke, but
Yes.
there is an associated name in your Shona language for
Mhm.
Yasuke, right?
And
And
there
so
is,
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the
and
Shona
so yeah,
language.
and so he wouldn't get his name changed because of the warrior. He was initiated into a warrior class, so he would never give up the name he was given during that time. He was a kid. We have speculated, right? We speculated. We don't have anybody telling us. We speculated, looking at the cultures that he came from, right? And the skills he had to have. Plus, he had to have language, right? One of the
he was
reasons he got
gifted.
picked. One of the
Mhm.
reasons he got accepted by Nobunaga is because he was able to speak fluent Japanese. Now we got to remember how long it takes to get from Southeast Africa to Goa. I mean, you've got to go back up to like Somalia and then around. You know what I mean? You don't go straight across. So you're on that ship for a long time. So you can, like I've been on ships with like merchant seamen, and one of the things that they do is they have libraries. They learn you can learn all kinds of things. So he arrived in there and picked up the language really fast, right?
Mhm.
The other thing is that coming to Kyoto from the coast was a very dangerous trip. You
How
know,
long was he in Japan before he met Nobunaga?
He was there about a year and a half. He
So he
would
picked up
be
Japanese in this
he,
time.
no,
Just
no, no, no,
boom,
no,
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 got it.
no,
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 no.
not,
He didn't
not
pick up
exactly.
Japanese there. No, he picked up Japanese beginning. See, the other thing we don't know is how cosmopolitan the world was then. He probably picked up Chinese in Mutapa. He probably picked up Japanese when he got to Goa because the Jesuits were taking Japanese slaves. They were taking Japanese slaves and shipping them around the world, right?
Mhm.
This is one of the points of conflict between between the Taiko and the Jesuits, right? That's why they got expelled, was because Taiko went down to the dock one day and saw that there were 200 slaves on the docks, and that's when he expelled these guys, right? So Yasuke is someone who would have brought this knowledge of falling empires, right?
Sorry, just a quick thing.
But
I don't know the
let's
position
go
of
back
Taiko.
to
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
What
let's
is the
go back
position of
to-
Taiko?
Huh? The
I can-
Taiko.
Taiko. That's Hideyoshi.
Oh, okay.
Taiko's Hideyoshi, and I'll explain.
Mhm.
He was actually, when he went to Goa, he was picking up Portuguese as
Mhm.
far as what the Jesuits record, and so basically that was the lingua franca of the Jesuits. And so he'd be picking up the Portuguese. He would also be picking up the time he'd spent in India, picking up languages there. Plus, he knew his own languages. Floyd's right. He probably picked up some Chinese because when you got into Asia, you picked up partially Chinese. And but the one point I will disagree with him on is that most likely he's picking up some Japanese, but it's when he arrives in 1579. He had a natural gift for languages, in addition to his fighting skills, in addition to everything else he could do. And so he spent a year and a half in total immersion. And so
That's cool.
when he shows up to Nobunaga in March of 1581, I believe it was, and at that point he is speaking some Japanese, he is showing off his skills.
Now,
And
one
he is
thing
getting-
that's important to realize is that the Chinese that he picked up, his ability to speak Chinese would make him an aristocrat, because that's who spoke Chinese in Japan, right?
Yes.
It's in the upper classes spoke Chinese. See, the other thing is, he came from the same kind of culture that Japan was. He came from he came from a country of warring states, right? He was trained in a spiritual warfare, right? He came up trained. The difference between samurai training and like African warrior training is not that different. You know, the swords are different, you know, but there was carving steel in Africa for 2,000 years before it got in the West, right? They were making incredible weapons there, you know. So he was also educated. He was a poet. There were things that you had to learn in order to be a warrior. You had to learn herbalism. You had to learn healing, right? You had to learn poetry, right? What samurais sit around doing at night before they go to battle? They sing songs. They do Nobunaga was a big no practitioner. He would do, and they would sit around and do songs. Right now, when you go to Japan and you have dinner with a bunch of Japanese people, they don't do karaoke, but they do, but they get up and get drunk and sing bushis, right? I was like, I can't sing a bushi, but they want everybody to perform. So Yasuke was able to fit into samurai culture because of his background, right? He had seen war, right? And they talk about war, and these long poems that he learned were about wars, were about great battles, you know. And he would have been able to explain these battles. Now we could only speculate on how fluent he got in Japanese, you know. But like I've met most Africans I know already speak 4 or 5 languages, you know.
Yeah, it's the most multilingual continent.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like they speak 4 and 5 languages, and they pick up languages. I got a friend who works. She speaks 32 languages, right? And she started
32.
32 languages. 32. She works at the UN, and I'm like, how do you do 32 languages? She said that's all she's done since she was 15, was learn languages, you know. So she knows South Sea Islands. She knows dead languages. She's one of those, you know, one of those polyglots. So so there's this. So we're speculating, but when we look at the Matsudara, we look at the Matsudara diaries, and we look at the Lord Nobunaga Chronicles, we get a lot about him, right? Now the other thing is that I've had people contact me from Kyoto who have oral history about Yasuke, you know, and we're collecting that now. All right. I'm really interested in the oral histories because the oral histories are going to help me for the documentary. You know,
Is there anything about what they said that you can reveal now, or do you want to keep that for the movie?
No, because I don't want to repeat stuff until I can get some kind of verification. You know, so
Okay.
Because when people tell me certain names, there's scholars that I have in Japan who can tell me who these people are. There's a lineage of people. You know. There's like I've come up with now, somebody pointed me to some artifacts that featured Nobunaga and Yasuke together. Some like gunpowder containers. I was going to say Netsugi's and
Oh, that's
Netsugi's
cool.
Yeah. So they've got these gunpowder containers because apparently Yasuke was also an expert rifleman, and he would have learned that in East Africa because the Dutch had been there before the Portuguese, and the Dutch were all about trading guns. But they wouldn't have been, but they wouldn't have been as sophisticated as the Portuguese. It took the Portuguese 150 years to subdue East Africa, and it was only when they got cannons. It's only when they got cannons and they improved their weapons. They could sit on the river. They could sit on the Limpopo River, and they could fire. They could fire shells 2 miles in.
That's what happened with Commodore Matthew Perry with
And-
Japan.
That's
And
separate
The
issue,
bigger
yeah.
cannons.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
just had
Yeah,
bigger
yeah.
cannons.
Yeah, the technology when it was only swords, they subdued that continent through better technology and better and they had better tactics. A
Guns,
lot
germs, and steel.
and intermarriage. A lot of those guys were
Oh,
married
yeah.
married into families. The Jesuits come in and they would get control of a king or of a ruler's kids and convert them to Catholicism, and then they would have power over the kid. And next thing you know, like in China with the Chinese rights controversy with Cardinal Ricci, they're expelling and killing and getting rid of people, and that's how you came up with all the Chinese secret societies, because of Catholicism's control over the Chinese ruling class. And these are the things, and this is what's important about understanding this world, right? We're looking at a world, and that world is something that's been, heretofore unknown to a whole lot of us. I've got a former college professor who just wrote a paper on the gold mines in East Africa, and I mean, it's like there's like 47 different cities of 2,000 people or more, and about 50 gold mines. You know what I mean? This is a really rich area.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I ever heard of Yasuke at all until like 5 years ago when I lived in Japan for 3 years. Like it just became popular in my experience, like really blew up in the past 5 to 10 years. It's interesting.
I knew about him living there. That was the thing, though.
This is a little while before that.
Yeah, there was a children's book written about Yasuke in 1968, but I think it was a reprint. I think it came out after the war.
It did,
and it got suppressed, and then it was reprinted. I was told it came out. There's this real interesting relationship between the Japanese and Africa, and they wheeled Yasuke out back in the early 1900s when they made an alliance with Ethiopians. The Japanese and the Ethiopians, they were going to join their royal houses at one point. I mean, this stuff is all but that's all. But that all gets derailed by the Axis by when they join Germany and become part of the Axis, right? So there's stuff in it. I mean, there's so much information. There's so much old information. So much new information, but we are not there. We're doing a film, right? Mandela Dube is going to be the director of the film. He's got 3 films on Netflix now. One is called Silverton Siege. The other one's called Kalushi, and the latest one was the Hunter, Heart of the Hunter, right? And Heart of the Hunter actually is sort of connected to the Yasuke story because this guy is descended from someone in the Mutapa Empire. He's descended to a great warrior priest from the Mutapa Empire, and he still practices those warrior rites. So anyway.
So let's get back to the game real quick. What were you going to say, Mike?
Wait, no, before we go on, I did want to get back to something because I don't want to leave that hanging there.
Yeah.
We talked about Valignano for a minute there.
Valignano was very progressive. He was very
progressive for his time period.
Yeah.
Valignano came out and said, like I said, we have better technology.
Mhm.
They have a better culture. Valignano
Yeah.
was the one when Valignano shows up the first time, you had a guy named Francisco Cabral who was in charge of the Jesuit mission, and Cabral was as Eurocentric as they come. He was trying to force people to change to Western culture, adopt to Western culture. And so what Valignano did, the first thing he did was to fire Cabral. Or Cabral just retired, just said, okay, I've seen the writing on the wall, I'm retiring immediately. But he forced the Jesuits starting with chopsticks. He got into tea ceremony.
That's good.
He also said he instituted learning the Japanese language. He said, we have no business coming here and trying to teach without learning something first, because we're basically, they were trying to run tens of thousands of converts with just a few people, and they couldn't convert enough Japanese.
Yep,
because they were trying to force them into European ways, and it wasn't working. So one of the things so he forced the Japanese language study. He also forced a little bit of bathing, though this always makes me laugh. This always makes me laugh.
A little bit.
Well, the final word the Jesuits agreed to was twice a month in summer and once a month in winter. And
they had such great baths.
And the Japanese, and it's a separate thing. He said, stop making them dress like us. If the Japanese want to dress like their own Buddhist monks, we'll let them dress. Now, the Europeans who are in Japan, they've got to wear black. That was unquestioned. But the locals were allowed. And you had other people coming in. Like they threw out, when they created their schools, they threw out Greek and Latin and started teaching, and started getting people who could teach Chinese and Japanese to the students coming in as Chinese lit, Japanese lit, in order to let that go. But getting back to Yasuke, and he had the ability, and he basically sort of learned Japanese, like I said, again, by being just dropped into it. And just because he was I still use the word genius when I think about just how incredibly smart that guy was. And as they moved through, Valignano was heavily dependent on Yasuke for just for his own safety. And that people wanted to be, there were a lot of people who would have loved to have picked off Valignano.
I think this is something we didn't establish, just in case not every listener is entirely familiar. But yes, Yasuke was originally a bodyguard for. He was a
bodyguard, and so he shows up, and they get to Oda Nobunaga, and they said March of 1581 is when they finally meet Nobunaga, and it happened, I think, at Azuchi Castle. And so you have the situation where Nobunaga is just like doesn't believe Yasuke's skin color.
Oh boy, here we go with that one. Here we go with that. Go on, tell the story. But
well, and so basically he forces Yasuke to disrobe just the top half, and they try to wash him off.
Yeah.
And they just and finally
this happens a lot in like the ancient world, and like there's videos of like white explorers going into Africa, and I've seen the video of them trying to wipe off the white from their skin.
But Yasuke was not the first black person to go to Japan. Matter of fact, there had been black mercenaries in Japan before Yasuke got there. They came with the first Portuguese back in the early 1500s.
But this is the first one that Nobunaga had met, though, right?
No.
But Floyd,
there's different
black mercenaries were in the southern part of the country. They hadn't gotten into Kyoto.
Yeah.
That's why you hadn't seen him in that time.
This image, this picture, this image of this guy taking us, and they're brushing him with brushes. I've seen all of these different kind of pictures, right? This stuff looks like some Mississippi antebellum South sort of postcards. That's what the stuff looks like, right? So I question this, and I can tell you this: that ain't gonna be in the film. Okay.
I agree. It's really embarrassing
It's
that it happened. But
and
the number of you didn't have people.
there
that
is a way. There's a way that it could have happened. There's
Yes.
a way that it could have happened because where he came from, right? So because black people come in all different shades, depending on where you come from. He's not from the Swahili coast. The Swahili coast people can look as light as me, as light as you, but in the interior, the people are pure. They're like they haven't really intermixed yet. I mean, the whole world is an intermixture.
Mhm.
All life begins in Africa and it spreads out from there, right? But so when he goes there is a way that could have happened, but the way that it's described by the Jesuits,
Mhm.
and the way that because that's not Japanese artists that drew that picture. You know what I mean? I don't know where that picture came from.
not
was
But
trying
Japanese.
to
I
find out.
think,
No, it's not Japanese
isn't
artists.
it? Wait. But it's
never
entirely
seen the art.
possible. It's entirely possible that Nobunaga wasn't exactly woke at the same time.
No,
Exactly.
there's no way.
know?
Woke ain't got nothing to do with it. What it has to do with is that if there is a difference, right? If you see difference and somebody puts their hand next to your hand, right?
Mhm.
And they've never seen you. Maybe they've never seen somebody this dark. Now there's another thing that like there's a group of people that the Japanese there was an island and the warriors wore blackface. They painted themselves black before they went into war, right? So that would be a context for him asking that question, not because he hadn't seen somebody black before. You know what I mean? It's like, are you really? I mean, the guy was big. I mean, the guy was six. He was supposed to be 6'2".
He was a foot over everybody else. Yeah.
He was a foot over everybody else, except
Especially Japanese people.
Valignano.
Yeah,
Valignano.
Valignano would have stayed. They were close to the same height. Yeah.
They were.
Valignano was also tall. Wow.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay,
He was
got
6'2". But the thing is here that when you look at Yasuke, when you have to think of if you look at Oda Nobunaga and the way he understood things,
Mhm.
when Christianity first arrived in Japan, they thought it was a sect of Buddhism.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Because the reason being, starting early, they would use one of the first translations they used for God was Dainichi, which turned out to be a Buddhist deity. And this was by Anjiro, the first Japanese convert, using a Buddhist, because there weren't a lot of concepts. And so you would have, and so what they thought was the Jesuits are headquartered in India. Buddha is from India. So therefore they saw Catholicism as an offshoot of Buddhism. And then they also saw Yasuke because there are some in Buddhist lexicon.
Oh, right. I remember reading. Yes,
there
I've
are some
heard
there
this
are
before,
some
yeah.
deities who have a darker skin. They
Right,
saw
right.
Yasuke as possibly being just like that.
Mhm.
And he had to some of these people, he had a almost godlike or some type of deity figure.
He was considered a yokai.
Yes, not a yokai, but I think of yokai as more of as demons.
That would be more like a monster kind of thing.
But
those
as he
are
was coming from the
native
countryside, there was adventures that they had because you have to fight off brigands on the way to.
Oh yeah, you have to fight off brigands.
Kyoto. Yeah,
They
there's
saw
like
the Portuguese as
Yeah.
demons as well. You've got to
Yeah.
remember in this time period, all the Japanese monsters have red hair and blue eyes.
yeah.
So first you have the Spanish, and then you're following by the Dutch. What do you think?
Yeah. Like,
So-
they're coming in with a certain idea, yeah.
Yeah, I mean when Nobunaga's advisors told him about the Christians and the Christian warlords, Nobunaga was still under the idea that these people are Buddhist. And his first reaction was, I've got 8 sects of Buddhism trying to kill me. Tell them to take a number.
Nobunaga didn't even like Buddhism, right? He was for Shinto
He was
mainly.
No, Nobunaga just considered himself to be God. It
Yeah.
was more of he was agnostic more than anything else.
Of course he did. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I got it.
He didn't like ninjas either.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
let's give ninja. He didn't like.
That's another
he-
story.
That's another story. And the ninja term is actually a 20th century
Yeah.
term. The
Yeah.
actual
Yeah,
term is
yeah,
shogi.
So one
So
of the
maybe
things,
Nobunaga would be upset with Assassin's
yeah,
Creed.
one of the things the
Depends how
guy
he's portrayed
from
in it.
Kyoto, the guy from Kyoto who contacted me on LinkedIn, by the way. One of the
Okay.
things he told me was that Yasuke's relationship with ninja families. Now we brought it up, right? And I'm
Oh
like,
wow.
I said, that's interesting, you know. But he's going to be interviewed by my partner in
Oh,
Tokyo.
that's awesome. I'd love to hear
You know,
that.
you know what I
That
mean.
would be good.
But it's like but yeah. So there's so there's there's, like even though Nobunaga knocked him off, he probably used a he probably back channeled another ninja group to knock him off. So it's so who knows? I mean, I'm just going from a cinematic standpoint and like just speculating. I mean, because
Yeah.
that's all we can do. All we can do is speculate the best we can. But the actual story, the actual history we have comes from the Japanese, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't come
Comes
in
from the
from the
Japanese.
Jesuits.
The only written
Yeah,
history we have comes from the Japanese. It also
yeah,
comes from the Jesuits. And
yeah.
the thing you can see is once he becomes in the employ of Nobunaga,
Mhm,
Nobunaga is taken with Yasuke's
mhm,
skills, Yasuke's
Mhm.
abilities. He
mhm.
gives him a house. He basically
He pays him,
he pays him. He
gives him a wife. Yeah.
essentially promotes him to Hatamoto. If you've watched
Mhm,
Shogun, that's what William
mhm,
Adams
Yeah.
gets, or
Yeah.
Blackthorn gets promoted to, and he's becomes part of the amazing story about Yasuke to show how far he went in Japanese culture goes to Nobunaga's assassination.
mhm.
Now, he fought a couple of times. The first time was within the shinobi groups in Iga.
What?
The ninja, like,
Yasuke did that? I never heard this part. That's awesome.
okay, what Yasuke did not fight in there. It was more of afterwards, but they
Okay.
set up a trap. They set up
Yeah,
an ambush for Nobunaga, and
yeah.
Yasuke was there when it happened, and they
Okay.
survived. But that was his first taste of battle in Nobunaga with Nobunaga. The second time is going after the Takeda
Hmm.
and following in Nobunaga's son, who was taking out the Takeda clan. And so that's where, if you've got female, though there's not a real history of female shinobi, the old term for ninja.
Mhm,
If you're going to have that, as I think I understand Assassin's Creed is going to,
mhm,
Yes.
the best way you're going to pull it is you're going to pull it from where the Takeda clan would have been, because there's
mhm,
some understanding that this is where he fought. And so I don't know how they're doing it. It doesn't come out to November,
mhm.
but you've
Yeah.
got two castles. You've got I cannot remember the name, Fukuyama, I think, which would be Akechi Mitsuhide's castle.
Mhm.
And then you also have, I want to say they also are using Reddit. Maybe they are using Takeda Shingen's castle, one of the two.
Mhm.
But they're using those two. Those are the primary places. And again, I'm going off the top of my head. I read something a while back. I don't remember which castles they're using, but I think one of them did belong
You
to
just made
Mitsuhide.
Ran run through my head.
I made what?
Ran.
Ron?
Yeah.
I loved that
Yeah.
movie.
You just made that movie run through my head. Shingen.
But let's go.
This
But
leads
let's
to
get
a
back.
question I have, though. I'd
But
like to ask
well, let me,
this.
Mike. Can I
All right,
finish
all
one
right,
thing?
all right, all right, yeah.
When you get to Nobu, and this is he's been there maybe 15 months when the assassination goes down,
Of
and
Nobunaga.
of Nobunaga, the assassination of Nobunaga,
The burning of the Honnoji.
the burning of the Honnoji,
Well,
the enemy is at Honnoji.
he's not assassinated though, is
No, he's not. It's a Japanese assassination. He takes his own life.
he? Right.
Oh yeah. There, yeah.
I always say assassinated in quotes.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Nobunaga has just a small group of people surrounding him. His most trusted fighters, his pages, plus his most trusted samurai, and one of them is Yasuke. So in that 15 months,
Hmm.
he becomes almost in the right hand, somewhere in that inner circle, in that advisor circle of Oda Nobunaga.
It's set up for a really
Yeah.
great game, story wise. I've never personally been too into like how Assassin's Creed plays, personally, but the stories they tell are cool. And the other thing too is like I've never super been really into like how they have the sci-fi aspect of it, like like going into the memories of of the lineage or whatever. Just start the game off in the history, and we can have this. We can have the same gameplay mechanics. We can have the same everything. We don't need this extra sci-fi thing.
But this is what Gaiden. But that's what Gaiden is, isn't it?
Not gaming Gaiden. Well, gaming Gaiden is, but not Assassin's Creed.
You know what I mean? I mean, like digging into this side information. You know, digging into the story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Digging into the story. See, I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff. I want to know that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I want to know what the origin of something is. I want to know, where a person came from, what motivates him.
But I'm saying the sci-fi aspect of going through the memories just to tell the history of the. I'm just saying, I like sci-fi, but I just don't think it works with Assassin's Creed.
Oh, okay.
Just be historical,
and then let you
forget
play the
all
game.
the sci-fi stuff.
Yeah,
but
that was the issue with the medium.
Stop you from having to Google it and go find it, right? So they just give it. It's just consider it hypertexting.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just me. I'm sure a lot of people love it. What's funny too about this game wise too is Assassin's Creed, Ubisoft, the company that makes Assassin's Creed, they've said for years, we're an Italian company. We're never going to make a game about Japan because we're going to be all about Europe and blah blah blah. You know. And there's already a bunch of games about Japan. We're going to do our own thing. That's cool. You guys made a lot of money and all that. And then what happened was Ghost of Tsushima comes out and then changes everybody's opinion. And they're like, well, you know what? I guess we will make a game about Japan after all. If there wasn't Ghost of Tsushima, there wouldn't be this game, probably.
Well, they did have another Assassin's Creed set in China, didn't they?
Yeah.
Was it 2D sides? It was like 2D side-scrolling one.
I don't even know about that sounds like maybe I don't know. That's probably one of their more.
It wasn't one of the mainline stories.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. There are, Japan makes a lot of games about their own history, so that makes sense, and it makes sense for an Italian company to make something about more Eurocentric, I guess. France. Or France. Okay, France.
But this game is going to sell.
But,
I think
it's going to sell too. It's just it's a fun idea to speculate what happened to him.
Yeah. Controversy always results in 30 to 40% more sales.
That is true.
and these crazy guys online, man, have made it. They have brought more attention to that game than advertising ever could.
Yeah, true.
They've introduced this game to people that don't play games and who are going to buy it just to spite these guys.
Well, I started off this podcast because of like what I've seen on TikTok in particular, like people saying he's not a samurai. That was why it was my first question to you guys, because it's like it's fact that he was in the employ of
Internal
Nobunaga.
bias is a bitch, man.
And he was his sword bearer. He delivered his fucking head to his son. Like, what do you want? This is what a samurai does. He fought in battles under Nobunaga.
Yeah, they said he
I
wasn't
can't get
a samurai.
it either.
He's a retainer. He's not a samurai. I'm like, what the hell?
That's somebody doesn't know what they're talking about. And that's splitting hairs at its finest.
Yeah.
Because and I'll explain what I mean. The image we have of a samurai, the image we have in the modern samurai, doesn't exist until Tokugawa.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, but the original, we've all heard the term samurai means those who serve.
Right. That's it. There it is.
But let's go to the tale of that. Let's go to, I think, the tale of the Heike. And I've got a translation by Dr. McCullough, and she puts in there, the thing is, by this time period, he said the hardest thing about the word samurai is that everybody doesn't realize we've taken a term that starts 17th century onward when they formalized the caste system, and we've applied it back through history. And so it used to be,
Bushi.
came from,
I think he was called Bushi, right?
Bushi just means warrior. Bushi
Yeah.
just means warrior. He would have,
Right.
by the time you're getting into the late 16th century, the term samurai has finally developed. It went through a lot of gyrations. You would have, if you go back about 100 years, 200 years, the word samurai would have more translated as squire, and you would have been using the term gokenin. And it used to be saburai, and then you have the nominal form sabarahu, sabarahi, sabarahu, and then but the H was silent in Heian Japanese, and so that's why you went from sabarao to sabarai to samurai, and
That's cool. That's cool.
and so that, but like I said, it was silent. You could back in Heian Japan, back in the 8th century, when this term first comes out, and there's some tracing it to Nara, but I haven't got anything more than somebody's post on Facebook. I'm not going to go with that. But what you mean is somebody, if it just meant somebody serving in a high-ranking position. So an armed retainer, yes, that would have been the old term of the sabarahu, sabarai. But somebody going down to the corner drugstore and picking up my meds for the week would have also been a sabarai back in the Heian era. And it's only as you come in a few hundred years and you come into an armed retainer, which is by the tale of the Heike, the term samurai is using, the term we know of today as samurai is being used mostly as an armed retainer, though not always. And then you get to the 16th century where it's finally becoming samurai. But we all think of samurai in that caste, in that modern caste system, which doesn't exist until the 17th century. But we've applied the word retroactively. And that's one of the biggest challenges in looking at Japanese history. There are so many terms, like in and I'll say it with the Shogun, in the most recent Shogun series. They don't say the word kimono. Do you know why?
Doesn't exist yet.
Doesn't exist yet. But everything is done on a kimono. In most things, everybody says kimono to mean what was a kosade or an osa or anything else, but it doesn't exist.
So you're saying Yasuke is in Japan in a time where the word samurai itself doesn't really exist yet.
No, I'm saying
the job does, but not the word.
I'm saying that basically it's almost there. It is in the
he's
latter
on the
half
cusp
of
it. Yeah.
We are on the cusp of it being
so he's actually a pioneer. He's like one of the first.
And you'll need a linguist to be accurate.
Yeah.
But basically, when you come in the 16th century, samurai starts meaning what it starts to mean, and then in the 17th century, when Tokugawa takes over, it's codified into the state we know it today.
So,
but
there were Jesuit rumors that they were gonna. This is on the rumor side of the Jesuits after everything had gone down, apparently. And correct me, where he said the Jesuits rumored that the Japanese were going to give Yasuke a castle as well.
Oh,
you ever heard that
one? You've got me on that one.
Okay. I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't heard it.
I haven't heard that. The only thing I know, and and this gets back to the game. They said, how can a 6'2" man hide? And that's another thing I've complained. How can he hide? And I'm thinking,
well, he doesn't. I think that when you look at the review for the trailer, he doesn't hide. He just charges through things, right? Like it's like a classic beat 'em up game. He's coming in brute force, and she's going in stealth.
Right.
So if you want to choose your play style,
she's the ninja. Yeah,
she's the ninja. But he still has.
He's the samurai.
He's the muscle, right?
When you go into 1614, when the Jesuits, when the Catholics go into hiding, you have 47 Catholic priests go into hiding. One of the numerical ironies of Japanese history is that the number of priests who went into hiding to avoid the Tokugawa is the same as the number of Ronin who went into hiding to basically avenge their lord a century later. Yeah. Both had 47.
Yeah.
And these 47 managed to hide. They got captured. But you think of the guy you see in Silence. He hid for nearly 2 decades before they finally got him.
Yeah.
And he wasn't and so when you think of how could Yasuke hide? The same way these guys did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I'm a child of the '60s, and so the Chambara films, the samurai films, weren't really samurai films. They were anti-samurai films. A lot of So Kurosawa's first films were about Ronin. Really, his characters rebel against the samurai system. It's only later. It's only later when he does Ran and Kagemusha that he recounts these great battles, right? The history of the unification of Japan. That's what those are about. But it's like I was really kind of fascinated. Like being in martial arts. Like martial arts dojos are run like yakuza dens. You know what I mean? Your loyalty to your teacher. Follow them any place, even
Oh
into
yeah,
the war.
yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? It's like some yakuza mafia shit. And it's really, and so like seeing Yasuke as a samurai, as a like I was really kind of resistant to it because those cultures, those old cultures. I'm not one to judge, but it's just like people suffer a lot, under those feudal systems. I've been to Japan about three times, and the one thing that I noticed about Japan is the same thing I learned about England. Feudalism is still alive. Feudalism is still alive in a whole lot of ways. I mean,
What do you
Don't mean to
mean by
laugh. I'm
that?
sorry.
though?
That's
yeah, I mean, like the loyalty to the company, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
People, they had there was a disease in Japan when I first went there where people would die from overwork.
Kodoshi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Karoshi, yeah.
they would suddenly die from overwork.
I
It's
think
not
some of
sudden.
that,
I'm-
some of
I'm-
that
I'm-
is
I'm-
probably
I'm-
like a weird kind of passive aggressive
I'm
from
in a
losing World War
yakitori.
II.
I'm in a yakitori, and guy's boss calls him on the phone on the cell phone. He stands up and bows when he talks to him on the phone. And I'm sitting there going like, this is, and in England, it's like I watch, public school boys get away with public school boys like Boris, what's his name? They get away with murder, and people let them. You know what I mean? It's like I see all this stuff. In Russia, I saw a whole remnant, the whole remnants of the imperial system. You know what I mean?
I think that the guy bowing on the phone is just out of habit, mainly.
I think it's out of habit too. Yeah.
Of course, it's
Yeah.
out of habit, but it's out of habit because of what? Because of
Yeah, it's
Well,
it's
just
an
general-
internalized-
the origins of the culture.
There could be a little bit of that, but I think that's in that particular case. That's just
The
the habit
company.
of how they the standard Japanese.
I'm sorry, I brought it
etiquette.
way off track. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I just wanted to bring up something you mentioned before, Floyd, while Walt was talking. The key art. So this is not Yasuke's first experience in a game. It's not his first appearance.
no,
He's
it's
been in
not.
games before.
Yeah,
It's just that this is the time where they're really these angry mobs are mobilized more effectively or actively, and also Assassin's Creed is a very big seller. So there's
because
a
they
lot
have
more
to
eyes
play
on
as Yasuke because they have to play the game
Right.
as an.
But he's been in plenty of other games before.
course he
and,
has.
and they
Of
could
course he
play. So he was in
Yeah.
Samurai Warriors. He was in
Yeah.
Neo. But
Yeah.
in the Samurai Warriors key art, he's doing calligraphy and he's writing Bushi on the paper.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
just an interesting little thing I remember
Uh-huh.
you mentioned before. I was going to say,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the Koei Tecmo developed Samurai Warriors that featured him, had him
Mhm.
writing
That's
the
cool.
kanji Bushi.
Mhm. And he would have picked that up because there is an ideographic language in Southeast Africa.
Hmm.
There was a written language that looks almost like kanji. So there's so many similarities. You know what I mean? There's all of these historic similarities that people don't know because they don't know how. You have to know where something is if you want to find it.
I think there's probably a lot of mysteries with the Silk Road.
The
still
Silk
to this
Road and
day.
the spice trade. Silk
Yeah.
Road comes over, the spice trade goes down, under, and around, right?
But I would
The
also
Silk-
add something to Floyd. What did you say about the writing? There's about 8 cultures that have the first writing systems, if I remember correctly, and Floyd, correct me if I'm wrong, please. That we think of hieroglyphics as being extremely old.
Right.
You had like 8 different cultures
Yeah.
on the African continent in that time period who have established writing systems.
Yeah.
And the one change of that is Japan was late in developing a writing system as far as a
Chinese.
It took the Chinese because you had the Pekche.
Right.
Basically, the Pekche brought it over in the 4th and 5th century, and so you had writing getting into Japan earlier because it was on gifts, but it would look like decorative art. They weren't aware it was a writing thing yet until the Pekche introduced the kanji to the Heian, to the Yamato court. So as far as civilizations go, you have with Japan, I mean, going back to Africa, just you had these huge, like I said, I think a number is 8 that had a writing system going back thousands of years. Whereas on this side of the country, you had Japan coming to it late. You had the Okinawan culture, the Ryukyuan culture coming to it late. You also had the Ainu culture, who never developed I don't think ever developed a writing system.
I don't think they did either.
And it's one of the most fascinating. So when you get into Japan, a lot of stuff that just, some of the most fascinating things that we don't know about the ancient history of Japan is because we're looking at proto-history, where we're looking at the writings of other cultures to try to figure out what happened in Japan.
Oh, right.
Prehistory is where nobody's got it. Proto-history is when you have somebody else writing about you, but you're not writing about yourself. And then you have your own history. And so you've got proto-history writing about Japan, and Japan being a legend going far away. To me, it's one of the most fascinating things about it.
This is a slight detour.
Sorry, this is getting off subject.
No, actually, what I'm about to say is even more so, but I think it's interesting and somewhat relevant. I got a book on the Ainu. And it's written by a guy, like an Englishman that visited there in like 1880 or something. It's like it's pretty old. Oh, well, old-ish. And he says in this book that the Ainu have a legend that they themselves wiped out a race of like hobbit people.
Yes, it's called the Kotopukuri.
Yeah,
I didn't know
maybe
that.
this could be maybe, and who can prove this really, but you know, I think that's interesting. Like the Ainu wipe out a race, maybe, and then they get kind of wiped out by the Japanese later on, and it's just
what's interesting is the Kotopukuri is this, as the story goes about this, an Ainu fell in love with a Kotopukuri princess.
Okay.
And because he approached her, the Kotopukuri disappear. But there are other cultures within Southeast Asia that have a similar hobbit legend. The Kotopukuri is just one of them. But what I always found out is that the Japanese viewed the Ainu as hairy. Always described the Ainu as hairy.
Well, they were like kind of Caucasian-ish, right?
But then the Ainu described the Kotopukuri as hairy.
Okay.
And so that was always, in how they look at the history, that was the one term that seemed to be synonymous. And I don't know if that's just something other cultures say about it, one culture says about another when they don't know anything else.
Well, I mean, like the way, generally speaking, how Japanese people are compared to, Europeans.
Yes.
Seems like there's a little bit more hair involved on the European side, generally speaking. So, but also used as a epithet, right?
Yes.
From the Japanese to the Nanban, to the barbarian. Yeah.
The southern barbarians, or as they used in Shogun, Banjins.
Banjin, the Banjin.
All the Banjins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's start to wrap up here. Any kind of closing thoughts? Let's go with Floyd first.
Well,
as far as Yasuke, anything you want to leave us with?
Well, I am wondering if he's going to go to Shingu and stumble across the tomb of Jesus.
That's part 2 of this episode, maybe. We have to table that one.
Hey man, strangest thing I ever saw.
I know the story. It's still funny.
Yeah. Anyway, but and so hey, it would have been there then, but no. Um, I'm just happy to see it happen. I'm happy to see it
Yeah.
happen. This is a part of history that I think is I think it's going to be real healing, especially when people see how much intercultural uh, cooperation there was within this story, within that world. We don't
Mhm.
look at that world. I mean, I was actually really impressed. Pirates of the Caribbean. I never really watched the film. One night I watched it with my son, and I was surprised at how right they got the crews of the ships. You know,
Mm.
That's cool.
and how and how democracy operated on the ships. Democracy was really born at sea. You
I've
know,
heard that, and there
yeah,
was a lot more racial equality within
yeah.
pirates at that time. Yeah,
And Pirates of the Caribbean, I was sitting there watching that, going like, "Damn, this isn't bad."
yeah,
That they were really like telling that story
Mm.
uh, in a way where without forcing it. It occurred naturally. You
that was
know,
a fun movie. The first
yeah,
one, especially.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a lot of fun, but like that part of it, I was watching one of the third or the fourth one where they had the Chinese woman pirate, I think it was. And they used actual historical characters. Pirates, man, are
Mm.
like, there's a whole pirate thing when I was living in Mississippi. Um, was it Biloxi? There used to be there was a, I think it's in Biloxi in the town hall. There was a picture of a white pirate hanging. This white governor had been given part of, he had been given governorship of Biloxi for privateering against British ships. And
Okay.
it turns out that the pirate was really black, you know,
Okay.
and that
Oh,
and
they
that this
whitewashed
yeah.
him. Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah.
it was crazy. That's another oral history you have to get. Somebody
Yeah.
say, yeah, and here's a picture of it. You're like walking around town and people tell you. So it's like all of these histories. We need to recover these histories in order to maybe get back to where we were before the Europeans got hungry
Mm.
and needed, before they needed extra, they needed, they didn't have enough gold in Europe. They just didn't look hard enough. You know what I mean?
And spice, which they would end up not using.
It's oh right. They didn't right. They didn't have any right because it was too hot to spice. Oh, that's too spicy. Come on, man.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. But this has
Uh,
been fun. This has
yeah.
been
Thank you.
been
Yeah,
fun.
it's been awesome.
Thank you for inviting me to it.
No
I can't
problem.
wait to see the comments on your.
Oh yeah. Before we go to Walt's closing remarks,
Hmm?
any websites you want to plug, or thing that they can look up on Amazon right now, or anything like that
Floyd,
for
Um,
Floyd?
yeah, you can go to yasuke-san.com, yasuke-san.com,
Okay.
and you can go to yasuke-wayofthebutterfly.com, right?
Okay. Great.
And if you want to look at and everybody should watch Japan Memoirs of a Secret Empire. It should be on YouTube. It's been pirated enough, but there's information about it on PBS still on
Okay.
the PBS website. Japan Memoirs of a Secret Empire by
okay.
Cool.
Deborah Snow. That's a good place to start to really start to get a history of what Japan was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
right.
And
How about you, Walt?
I recently watched on Netflix The Blue-Eyed Samurai.
I love that.
So good.
I love that. It was really
It-
good.
It's
Surprisingly good
It's-
to me. Yeah.
I look at it and I think, is this historically accurate? No.
I didn't care.
I didn't care either. And it was
Yeah.
it's
It's
not
fascinating.
it's not for kids. It's
Yeah.
not for kids.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was just an enjoyable way to
It was-
kick back
It's
and
yeah.
just
Hmm.
enjoy a good friggin' story for a change.
It's fascinating. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
It's
When
like
I look at
Sleepy
Assassin's
Eyes. Mhm.
when I look at Assassin's Creed and this thing about Yasuke of is he a samurai? Is he not? Is he this? Is the female shinobis? And I just think to myself, get a life, people.
Yeah.
Um, it is a game. It's
Mhm.
fun. Just I'm doing this, and I'm not a gamer. I'm gonna try. I told my son who's played every Assassin's Creed game that I was going to try this, and he said, "Dad, give it up. Just watch somebody else on YouTube." Um, but it's a way to just have a good time. We
Mhm.
don't know the full details of Yasuke's life, and unfortunately, we never will, because, like I said earlier, he, in his way, he did change. He conceivably changed Japanese history,
Yeah. Yeah.
and for a guy who showed up and was there for just under 3 years,
Yeah.
or 3
Oh
years.
man.
That's just to think about that, to think
Yeah.
about the effect he had there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was there 3
Just to
years. I
have
didn't
some
do a damn thing.
appreciation. Have some appreciation for that, and just what's that?
I was there for 3 years too. I didn't do all that.
I was there.
But you
I was
could
there
have.
for 4. I met my wife in year 3.
Hey,
Okay.
that's pretty
And
cool.
she is Japanese. I
Yeah.
met my wife because of a Coke machine on Awaji Island. Basically, we some friends and I went to watch. We were on Awaji in the off season, and it was it was boring because it was the off season, but there was a violin concert going on, and so we go into the hotel, ask the price, and the girl freaks out and gets us the interpreter of the hotel, and we leave. We said too expensive. We leave, but in front of the hotel is the only Coke machine we know of. So we come back an hour later, and the interpreter runs out and says, "Y'all can come for free to the concert if you want. We've got low turnout this weekend. We need bodies." And so we go to the concert, and sometime we got invited to the reception, and then I uttered the world's worst pickup line to the interpreter, and she said, "That is so bad that I know he doesn't spend a lot of time in bars." That was my wife's reaction. And that's why she went out with me, and we've been married 29 years now.
Yay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
Thank you.
29
Just-
years. Yeah.
We celebrated our 29th anniversary.
Hey,
Um,
Congrats.
and so that was my accomplishment in 3 years, 3 to 4 years. So it was actually convincing someone to marry me. But
That's a big one.
it is a big
Yeah.
one. But
But did you turn the tide of Japanese history forever?
yes, but I'm saying
That's the
no, I
question.
didn't. No,
your personal Japanese history was
I
changed.
did
Yeah,
suggest
your
to
personal history. Yes, that's true.
I did suggest to someone at Coke that they need to start a dating app.
Before we're out of here, I wanted to say a little bit about what
I-
did you have something else? Yeah, go ahead.
That's
Go
what
ahead.
I was going to just mention. If for those of you want to know, I do Japanese history. You can check me out on Instagram, author Walt Mussel, or on TikTok, author Walt Mussel, or just my name, Walt Mussel, Mussell on YouTube. And if you go on YouTube, you can find that story about the Japanese hobbits, among
Okay.
some other things. I've got
Yeah.
hundreds of videos on short things, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, or sometimes just 15, 20 seconds. But
Yeah.
lots of
yeah.
interesting Japanese history. Search for it, and
Yeah.
also just my books as well. The Samurai's Heart, Samurai's Honor, A Second Chance, and hopefully soon The Samurai's Soul,
Yeah.
which will be
And
set
can-
in Osaka, 1990.
And can I recommend one more thing?
Okay.
Sleepy Eyes of Death, Collector's Set, Volume 1 on Amazon.
Okay.
Nemuri
Eyes.
Kishiro. Yeah. Nemuri Kishiro. Tales of a mysterious master swordsman born of the rape of his mother by a European monk during a black mass. He travels by
Okay.
himself with his sword. Revenge on the Jesuits.
Okay. Sounds good. Oh man. One thing I wanted to say, one of the last things I want to say was like there was one scene in Blue-Eyed Samurai where she's made her own sword and she turns to her sword master. Sword master looks at it and she hates herself because she's a half white, half Japanese person during Sakoku,
Yeah.
right? Which is the period of national isolationism. And
Yes.
he says, it's just something wrong with the sword. And he says, looking to her, he says, you took out too much impurity. You should have left a little bit of how God made it in it. And I thought that was such an excellent line. And that, relates to her character because she's trying to make something pure.
Yeah.
And he's like, leave it as it is, mostly as it is, or leave it somewhat natural. You still have to forge it, but leave it somewhat natural. That was just an incredible scene.
This is why I brought
like
up this is why I brought up Sleepy Eyes of Death, because there's stuff like that in this series.
Okay.
It's an incredible series, and it's almost like, I think maybe Blue Eyed Samurai maybe kind of like bit off of this series, Sleepy Eyes of Death, because he is a half, he's a redheaded samurai.
Okay.
Right? Because his father was probably his father was that redheaded monk, and yeah. So.
Oh, right,
so anyway,
right.
Yeah. So anyway.
All right.
Thanks,
Is that pretty
guys.
much it?
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you guys for coming on.
And if people want to buy the graphics of the comic book series, volume 1, 2, and 3, they can go to Yasuke-wayofthebutterfly.com. Leave your address, subscribe, and we'll let you know when it's available.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, one more thing, Walt. Go ahead.
I was going to say, check out my stuff, waltmussel.com. And if you have Substack, I have a Substack newsletter called The Chrysanthemum and the Cross. So please check that out as well.
Oh, okay.
Mussel's M-U-S.
Hey, you guys send me your addresses, and I'll send you a autographed copy of the comic.
Okay.
All right.
Volume one.
All right.
And for Walt's, it's Mussell if you're listening just on the audio version of the podcast.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much it?
Yeah.
Yep. I think it's
All right.
time.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll check you later.
Okay.
All
Take
right.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.